Yes, Courtney, I'm returning a call from Michelle Gonzalez Ramos.
Yeah, yeah. Just a second.
So we're recording here. I'll go here. I'm going to share there.
Okay, so can I plug this in?
Hi, Michelle. Yes, James Tyson here.
Donnie?
Yeah, Jim, mute yourself. Okay. All right. I hope everybody's seeing the
What's your role?
slide. Jim, mute yourself.
Well, I was hoping you'd talk to the medical team or the case manager, but let me talk to you.
Jim, mute yourself. Jim, mute yourself. Over to Jim.
Okay.
Well, let's see. I think
just a brief background. This is
I
his
think I can mute him.
hospitalization for urinary infections, and
Oh,
and he was just in on the first through the third.
okay. I'm trying
So
to.
it's unclear whether this is a new infection or the previous one had been completely treated.
Okay.
You know that hospitals, insurance companies, and the like don't like readmissions. So
I did it. I muted him. I've wanted to mute Jim Teisel on my whole career at the hospital. So now I got to
You did it.
I got to act it out. So Ramsey, our founder, sent me some interesting maps, and I'm only going to show about 10% of them. But this one I thought was worth passing on. It shows how all these mountain ranges are connected. And how you say, is it possible for Appalachia and Greenland to be connected to Norway and the highlands of Britain and North Africa? Well, we go back to millions of years ago when all the continents were connected. And there was such a thing called the Central Pangean Mountains. So this is all the continents were smushed together millions of years ago. And you remember we're doing the history of California. So California didn't exist. California is new land that was scraped off the bottom of the Pacific by subduction. So in this map, California isn't even present. So we're really going way back in the history of California. Now, then the continents started to separate, but before they did, right in the middle of them, there was this mountain range. And as the continent separated, that mountain range got bent around on itself and caused this continuity. So I thought that was worth a look to show how all these mountain ranges are connected. Looking ahead in 250 million years, we're going to be smushed again. So go figure. This is Mexico's borders before the Mexican-American War of 1846. Ramsey sent me. Teisel, he's probably still talking on the phone, but I threw this up for him. He had been in the company of some young Mexican women who all they could talk about was what a fool Santa Anna was for losing all this territory. And they didn't even know who Junipero Serra was. So what they imagine, and I was hoping Jim would tumble in at this point, but say, is this what they want? Because you get in Chicano's studies this proposal for reconquista, that is, that Mexico gets its land back. And it would be called Aztlan, apparently after Aztec land. And this would be how the borders would change. And then Ramsey threw in this map of CO2 emission and how intense it is in China. Of course, we were like that back in the Industrial Revolution. So we did our share, and now China's catching up. And then I thought this map was interesting. Homosexuality is pretty much accepted in most of the world, except for the colored parts. Note Burma stands out there, isolated in Asia, but most other countries accept it, except for the Middle East and Africa. So Mother's Day, I think a number of you follow Heather Cox Richardson, and she's really good. But here's what she reminded us that Mother's Day actually started in the 1870s after our Civil War and the Franco-Prussian War. And in this country, it was promoted by Julia Ward Howe. To change the society, to change the power structures so that you make war less likely, if not non-existent. And of course, this is all the grisly pictures of the carnage in our Civil War. The problem now is long-range weapons, and Mother's Day was started as a first step to try to prevent this stuff, but it hasn't quite worked. This is Julia Ward Howe herself. Interestingly, she's also known for writing the Battle Hymn of the Republic, which is a little bit at cross purposes to Mother's Day. So updates, I think Shigeko asked if we were going to report on this, and there are some people that we've covered so much in detail, and this is Sergei Shoigu, who is actually of Mongolian heritage, but his mother was Ukrainian. And we were speculating early on, would he support this? And not only has he supported it, but he's survived until now, despite all the setbacks. And he was the only non-Caucasian in Putin's power structure. Most of the KGB are his FSB now is the successor to the KGB. Most of those guys are Russians, many of them from St. Petersburg, where Putin is from. And the official reason was we need to get somebody in there in the Defense Department open to innovation and more advanced ideas. And one of his deputies was arrested for corruption, which is rampant in Russia, which is really a kleptocracy. And oh, by the way, there's these 355,000 casualties. So he still has a position. He bumped someone out of the Kremlin who was a hawk, which led to some speculation that maybe Russia eventually will go in a different direction, but we shall see. Did you have anything else, Shigeko, you wanted to add to that?
No.
Okay. And Yasmina is with us today. We welcome her. We certainly enjoyed her introduction when she came to our, I think, October 27th, 28th session last year. And she has sent me this invitation for a discussion with Angela Davis, known to many of us from the 60s and 70s, but she's still very active. And she's in conversation with a Canadian Jewish doctor who's a family practitioner, like Jim and I were, and David Pepper, who is on a road trip with his daughter in the Badlands of Dakotas. So he can't be with us here today. So thanks for this invite, Yasmine. Yasmine told me that you go to this place and they ask for a donation before you can register. But Yasmine tipped me off that you don't have to register. You don't have to donate. So that works. So
and just put a 0 in there when you click through. And you don't have to make a donation. I think it's $25, but these talks are, as you can tell, it's an hour and a half. They go pretty deep. There was a previous one that was a gathering of people who were very afflicted by what's going on there, different types of people, and it was a discussion that was guided by Gabor Mate and his son Daniel, and it was super cathartic, I think, to hear what people had to say and how he and his son managed through that. Because a lot of people have tons of angst about this. I have a lot of blaming that to go around, but we've got to find a solution. So I think these people are trying to find it, and it's quite worthy. I think it was for me. So,
well, thank you, Yasmine. Thank you. And again, I'll just reiterate: you're more than welcome to give a session on your perspectives, and be most welcome. I've been obsessed with how easy it is for terrorists to succeed in escalating violence and sabotaging initiatives, peaceful initiatives. And I go back to the Oslo Accords when the Israeli settlers first assassinated Yitzhak Rabin, who was negotiating the Oslo Accords and was headed in the right direction. Of course, there was the infamous atrocity where a settler went into the tomb of Abraham and Sarah and murdered 27 praying Muslims, and then there was a tit for a tat back and forth, and Hamas struck for the first time then in response to that atrocity. And then most recently we have Hamas and Gaza and where we are. And there's one country, though, where terrorists failed to escalate. It's an exception, a small exception, if you will. But I wanted to just expand on it for a minute because of the success. And it was in 2002 under their Prime Minister Vajpayee. And then most recently in the Mumbai massacres, which we remember took place in the hotel complex in Mumbai. And at that, each time the government of India chose to exercise restraint rather than to strike back full force. And this got a name. It's called strategic restraint. And it's a controlled approach without resorting to immediate retaliatory violence, which is the natural impulse, of course, as it was for Israel this time around. And they prevented this overreaction that leads to the other side overreacting. And all kinds of nasty things can happen, as we know. In the case of India and Pakistan, there's a particular argument for restraint because they both have nuclear weapons. And in this new era where Russia also has nuclear weapons inherited from the Soviet Union. Ukraine had them too, but they voluntarily gave them up with the understanding of a memorandum that there would be never any aggression against Ukraine. Russia signed that, by the way. So I asked ChatGPT just to enumerate what the elements of this were, and each time there were 4 key aspects: the diplomatic pressure, so to try to isolate Pakistan, and the demanding of Pakistan that they take action against the terrorists. This could have been used in Gaza. You could have isolated Hamas's patron, Iran, and embarrassed them and put them in the spotlight and on the hot seat. But instead, Israel changed the subject, and pretty soon it was their aggression that was the topic of conversation. Obviously, internal security reforms. There was a massive security failure in Israel, as there was in India. A public communication that the citizens are as upset as governments are, and so there has to be some kind of program to ventilate that. Regular updates. Could there have been a Gaza command center set up to deal with the public horror of what had happened? And then the legal and investigative processes. And this is what we were talking about last week, the international law. And we're going to talk about it again in just a minute and finish that topic. But there are legal channels, extradition, and the criminal courts, and certainly the International Criminal Court will start proceedings against Hamas and their leader, Sinwar. They should also start proceedings against the Hamas offices in Damascus and the liaison officers in Iran. There are other outlets for this sort of thing. Anyway, I asked ChatGPT. They gave me some abstract principles, and I learned you can engage with ChatGPT. I said, could you give me some real life examples of each? And ChatGPT said, certainly, with an exclamation mark. I guess I really got AI world going. And so here are some more real world examples. When we invaded Iraq in 2003, we should have realized that that was going to create a power vacuum, an unintended consequence, which ISIS exploited. ISIS walked right into that power vacuum and got their own power base. Coordination and cooperation. We certainly learned in the aftermath of 9/11 that the pieces to the puzzle. The FBI had some pieces to the puzzle, and the CIA had separate pieces to the same puzzle, and they didn't share the pieces. If they had put all their pieces onto the same puzzle board, they might have been able to establish a connection on what was coming, connect the dots, as they say. So that was addressed with the Department of Homeland Security and enhanced coordination to work across all the agencies of intelligence. Adaptive strategies. Well, Al-Qaeda adapted. They adapted the lone wolf attacks. And in turn, the community had to adopt by deputizing the public to be vigilant and be monitoring the online activities. And deterrence and incentives, the example given is the Philippines offered financial rewards to local individuals that could lead for the capture of terrorists. Public support, narrative control, and in the United Kingdom, where Rudy's about ready to visit, they enlisted local Muslim imams to enter into interfaith dialogues and emphasizing unity and peace. And that seems to have defused the situation. And then balanced security measures. We all immediately got used to taking off our shoes at the airport, and apparently the EU has pulled off the aviation security measures with more proportionate guidelines. So instead of taking away my fingernail clippers, they might let me keep them. Now we're going to finish international law. I asked, is international law, or is it just resting? And some of you picked up on that. That's from a Monty Python skit where John Cleese has purchased a parrot, and he takes it home, and the parrot dies immediately. And he tries to return the parrot, saying that it's dead. The owner of the pet store denies that it's dead and comes up with, it's just resting. And John Cleese responds with all these different synonyms for being dead. And they just go back and forth. And so I ask, is the International Criminal Court or the International Court of Justice that we talked about last week, are they still alive in 2024? And the Economist weighed in with a large article this week, fortunately for me, saying that rarely have international courts been busier. So they talked about the ICC and investigating Netanyahu in Gaza. They've already issued arrest warrant for Putin for war crimes in Ukraine. The International Court of Justice now, which is between nations, not individuals, it's like a civil court, is weighing genocide charges against Israel, bought by South Africa. In Strasbourg, the European Court of Human Rights, which is the most advanced court for human rights in the world, centered in Europe, is looking at requests to make Russia pay compensation to Ukraine using the frozen assets of Russia that various nations now have. And this builds off the European Court of Human Rights is a offspring of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This was issued, but there was no judicial enforcement in 1948. Well, Europe says, okay, we'll come up with our own European Court of Human Rights to enforce the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And if every region of the world would do that, maybe we could get somewhere. The European Court has 46 members, covering a population of 700 million, and this is the area and the countries that it covers. It's located in Strasbourg in France, and it looked like for a while after the end of the Cold War we were heading in the right direction. It's unclear. Belarus is definitely not a member, but at some point Russia was a visiting member of some standing. I'm not exactly quite sure what. But all of a sudden, in 2017, we get the compliance rate with this international court and the cases brought to it going down. So maybe that's where things begin to change. Nevertheless, given the European sympathy for Ukraine, this court is going after $300 billion of frozen Russian assets. Ukraine can submit its claims and is starting to do so. Now, Russia, I guess, had been a guest on the council, and they were expelled right after their invasion. But nevertheless, this court retains jurisdiction for events even that took place in the Russian-controlled occupied lands. So the other thing you will remember as we went back through the history, we talk about the Geneva Conventions of 1949, and those conventions ban genocide, torture, and more. So when the Bush government was accused of torture, there was an international convention covering that. And you all remember the story of Lemkin that I told in detail, and how the United States Senate finally approved the convention long after Lemkin's death. And then in 2005, the big step was the responsibility to protect. This principle was approved by the General Assembly. This was actually the policy that changed the ideas of national sovereignty resulting from the Treaty of Westphalia 360 years before then. So this was it. And retroactively, so this is 2005, you remember in 1999, a commission had found that NATO's actions in Serbia were illegal but understandable. And now, with this responsibility to protect, retroactively, you could say that NATO was off the hook for its bombing of Serbia, which was to protect the Albanians in Kosovo who were threatened with what was perceived to be a campaign of genocide. How would that have ever affected American foreign policy? Well, Kissinger couldn't have been doing deals with the Khmer Rouge in the 70s, where it was generally known that they were doing awful things. The connection there was China was in league with the Khmer Rouge and looking the other way, and Kissinger and China were cozying up to each other. But the bottom line in all this is Putin couldn't travel to Armenia or South Africa because both of those countries have signed these international conventions. And then in 2011, now we start the sad story. The first real world challenge in the use of responsibility to protect was Libya. And we're not talking about a genocide convention. We're just talking about a responsibility to protect, where you could see the forces and the army about ready to go into Benghazi. And immediately the UN Security Council voted a no-fly zone over Libya. The International Criminal Court announced that they would be investigating what was about to happen. And so as Obama said, I'm glad I had the UN Security Council did that. I refused to wait for images. We had to act before Gaddafi abused his power. And even the African members who are suspicious of these kind of uses to stop sovereignty supported the resolution. And Gaddafi was captured but killed, and it was never a question of genocide. It was always a difference of political ideology. But then you prevented a massacre, but it extended to regime change, and that wasn't what everybody had in mind, and certainly not the murderer of Gaddafi. And then Libya has descended into civil war, and all of a sudden, this intervention is seen as an instrument of destabilization and awakened long-held suspicions in Africa about Western intervention. And Hillary Clinton didn't help matters when she said, "We came, we saw, he died." That kind of arrogance was just like kerosene on the flames. And you can see from this banner the suspicion you came for your own oil interests. So now we move on to Syria, and the responsibility to protect certainly came up when it was reported Assad was using poison gas on his own people. And Obama drew a red line and for Syria. It was complicated. I remember when he drew the red line, Congress would not back him up. John Boehner would not back him up. In Britain, Parliament was not backing up an intervention in Syria. So guess who popped up and said, I'll take care of this. Putin said, I'll take care of the situation by persuasion, without violence. And lo and behold, they did. But they eventually resorted to carpet bombing of Assad's opponents. So that's a kind of a perversion of the whole idea. And now Russia has a base in Syria, a port in Syria, which is important for them for their connection of the Black Sea to the Mediterranean through the Bosphorus. Now they've got a refueling place for geopolitically. And then there was the question of the defector Snowden, who fled to Russia, and then in 1914, Ukraine. And each time Obama was powerless to do much about it. And this is, you remember this guy, Edward Snowden, who leaked all kinds of classified information. What happened then is Russia just bombed the heck out of all the Syrian rebels that Assad had been merely gassing. And that resulted in waves of refugees to Europe, which was fine with Putin because he wants to destabilize Europe at every turn. He's more a spoiler than anything else. What does he believe in? What is the future of Russia as a kleptocracy? Not much idealism there. And so let's look at the International Criminal Court and individuals. This is a different aspect of this. Post the Cold War, lawyers looked forward to some sort of universal jurisdiction against criminals. And, the first example of that, we've already talked about Serbia and Milosevic's threats to the Albanians. And what NATO did about it. Eventually, Milosevic himself was charged by not the International Criminal Court, because it wasn't quite ready, but the International Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia. Then a little bit later, and after the International Criminal Court had been approved, there was Charles Taylor of Liberia. Both Milosevic and Charles Taylor did stand a trial in international tribunals. It was a special court for Sierra Leone that indicted him. He was extradited at the request of the president of Liberia, a very progressive Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. And he was detained by UN authorities in Sierra Leone. So the international community was approving of this, and he went to The Hague, and he was found guilty and sentenced to 50 years in prison for murder and rape and other heinous crimes. And the judge said, these are the most brutal crimes in recorded human history. And now the international community had a formal legal system for addressing those. But now, this article, as of last week, we're no longer on the upswing. We're at the gates of hell, says the head of the Amnesty International. what we've been talking about, and what's been built up since the end of the Second World War, 7 decades, has been sacrificed or destroyed to the higher god of what she says is military necessity or geostrategic domination. And so what does she mean? She means the invasion of Ukraine, violating the UN Charter, specifically that bans the use of force in international disputes. And China supporting Russia, unlimited support, as they said in their joint declaration before the Winter Olympics in China. And China, of course, continues to repress the Uyghurs, which in the responsibility to protect, there would have been a legal precedent for intervening if you could make that case that the Uyghurs were being suppressed. And Biden repeatedly refers to the rules-based international order, which he's using as a catchphrase for all the things we've been talking about. But that's being mocked by China and Russia as just an American excuse that we're hiding behind this high-minded phrase, because we invaded Iraq without the United Nations approval in 2003. And I've brought that up repeatedly, so I won't harp on that. Now, though, we're seen as complicit because we are the #1 supporter of Israel in general. And so all kinds of aid. They're the #1 recipient of aid since the end of the Second World War. Israel is. And so you'd think if we are supplying them with so much aid, we would have a strong say in what goes on. But America's been walking a tightrope and often falling off. So as you will see in our use of vetoes, what do you do when the great power is a perpetrator? So Russia and we are permanent members of the Security Council, and we have the veto. And Russia used their veto when they invaded Georgia in 2008 and Ukraine in 2014. And the United Nations came up with 17 resolutions on Syria, and Russia vetoed every one, all 17. We've done the same thing in support of Israel 42 times. And China has been reluctant to approve even minor sanctions because they're still smarting from what they call 150 years of humiliation at the hands of the great powers, the British, following the Opium Wars. And this is our representative vetoing. And here it is in graphic form. So Russia are the red vetoes, and United States are the pink ones. And here it is by the year. So you can see the great powers are getting in the way of international law. rather than supporting it. Even the consensus, the strong consensus to curb nuclear proliferation is a victim of the war in Ukraine. In March, Russia vetoed a resolution to extend the work of experts who have been monitoring UN sanctions against North Korea. So that's ending as well. Why? Because Putin needs armaments, and North Korea doesn't make anything but armaments, apparently. This Z is the special signal that Russia is using in this war in the Ukraine. It's disturbing to see that used as a bit of propaganda. It just rekindles memories of the Nazi Hakenkreuz. Here we are. China wants to uphold the primacy of states after their 150 years of humiliation, and they're in the spirit of the Treaty of Westphalia, where you don't intervene no matter what. This is basically coming down to two teams fighting each other. America sees the G7, which is an economic club, basically as a steering committee for the world's advanced democracies. So the top 7 Western economies are part of the G7. And who's opposing us? The BRICS. It used to stand for Brazil, Russia, India, China, South America. But the BRICS have been adding a lot of countries that have joined or are affiliated. So you can see the new BRIC members, and many from the so-called global South. And this seems to be the new face-off in the multipolar world. But the multipolar world has 2 poles, and one is America and one is China. Russia is very much a junior partner. It is China versus the United States, the team captains, if you will, of these 2 teams. International law has been called a broken down car that somehow keeps moving. So you still have the International Court of Justice that has jurisdiction over the Genocide Convention. And they say, we're here, we'll hear whatever you have to say, but you got to prove intent. So here are the lawyers from South America presenting themselves to the International Court of Justice to accusing Israel of genocide. The court said, we'll consider your charge as plausible. We'll hold full hearings. Israel, in the meantime, make sure your soldiers don't commit acts of genocide, and allow more humanitarian aid to Gaza. But the court did not even try to order an immediate ceasefire. They didn't. That was a step too far for them. But they've come down with the preliminary hearing and cautioned Israel that they should let in humanitarian aid. But it doesn't seem Israel's doing that. So who's on the case? independent prosecutor has been appointed by the court, and he can, on his own, decide to prosecute individuals. They have jurisdiction in Gaza because even though Israel has not signed, the PLO has signed. And so a signatory has made a complaint. And so this independent prosecutor is investigating. He can't do much. All he can do is rely on other states to enact what he's going to recommend. Aggression is regarded as the supreme crime. Jim, you have a question.
Do. The PLO is not in control in Gaza, so it's interesting that they have they have sway with the ICC here.
Yeah, good point. I don't know how they got around that detail, but they did.
Seems like more than a detail. Hamas got control 10 years ago, I think, something like that.
So you're on Hamas's side, is that what you're
No, I'm saying, you know, if the court
Just
is
kidding.
following the rules of the international community, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I don't know the exact detail of that, but
I'm not on record as supporting Hamas, please.
I strike that from the record. Okay. And so a lot of other countries have declined to join. Israel hasn't joined. America hasn't joined. Russia hasn't joined. China and India, none of them have joined because they're afraid they're involved abroad, and they're involved that somebody could bring a case against their international involvements. This is the investigator who's been appointed. I'm always interested in the detail. He has demanded that Israel and America stop any efforts to impede, intimidate, or improperly influence officials in this matter as they're investigating. And what are the acts that have attracted his condemnation? Israel threatening to retaliate against the Palestinian Authority, which was, as we've just been discussing, were the ones that granted the court jurisdiction in Gaza. And America, for Congress, which has entertained calls for sanctions against his own International Criminal Court. So here, Israel and America are being accused of the same thing Donald Trump's being accused of, interfering with the processes of justice. So it's a quandary for Biden, but remember, he kind of likes the court now in their accusation in the Ukraine. And America is in a tough position. It urges publicly now Israel to do more to protect Palestinian civilians, but Israel's acting with weapons we've supplied it. America has confirmed that has suspended shipments recently, and it did stop vetoing Security Council resolutions on this on the matter in Gaza. It's let a few go through, and then I'm always interested in the personalities. So who is this Mr. Khan? Well, what I'm interested in, where was he? He's born in Britain. His father was a Pakistani immigrant who was a dermatologist. His mother was a nurse, so they're both working in the National Health Service. And he led the investigation of ISIS atrocities in Iraq, which was one of the first things the International Criminal Court did. He was elected as the chief prosecutor by vote of the 131 members of states who have signed up. And it was a hard-fought election. He was challenged, and he won in secret ballot, the first in the court's history. He came up through the English bar with a great reputation, and got his first taste of international work in the court against Milosevic, former Yugoslavia. So that's that. So what's the Economist ends? What's the point of all these court battles? At minimum, to impose a reputational and perhaps economic cost on those who are guilty. To strengthen the negotiating hand of the victim. If you've won a case in an international court, you certainly have a stronger case in diplomatic talks. And also just establish a historical record. And some would like to take another step and call a special tribunal to prosecute Russia, just like a special tribunal for Yugoslavia. What's that? Okay, so we're winding down here. Putin can't travel in Armenia and South Africa. The International Court of Justice, Ukraine and Russia are exchanging accusations of genocide. Russia saying that Ukraine started it by discriminating against Russian speakers in the Donbass. And here we are. The cynical realpolitik has made a comeback. We've seen Ethiopia, Myanmar, Sudan, Syria, Yemen. The international community hasn't done much to stop that. This is a picture reminding us of Rwanda and what this can lead to. And the mid-sized powers, the people in BRIC need to realize that the United Nations still needs to speak out against the Rohingyas, what's happened to them, the Tigrayans. In Sudan now, 25 million people in need of food. This is the most people affected anywhere in the world. But Russia and China have blocked calls for a ceasefire. And we know about Gaza, where 33,000 civilians and fighters have been killed. As I said, America has allowed a motion to pass against Israel without vetoing it. So we'll see. as my earlier letter sent out, I'm a little bit depressed and kind of eager to return to the history of California and just leave the present for a while and go to the past in the land of the future. That's my proposed mission statement for next week. But I'll stop talking now finally and let the others ask questions or chime in. Okay, well, I'll see you all next week, and I promise I have to do California or I'm going to sink into a deep depression.
Amen.
We don't want you to be depressed, but some of that early California history is pretty depressing too.
Yeah, that's probably true.
So, yeah, where to next? All right. Well, thank you all.
Thank you.
We're all pawns in the hands of kings.
Yeah.
Very nice, John.